After what happened on this show, Jasmine Crockett may close it down, but you'll find out how it all started now. Jasmine, welcome to the show, Kimmel began, his voice soft but with a barely noticeable edge of challenge. You know, I've heard you're a real star in Dallas, but here in Los Angeles, we like to find out who you really are. So tell us, what's it like being a congresswoman in a world where politics feels more like a reality show? The question was safe, and Jasmine responded with a slight smile. Jimmy, politics can indeed be a circus, but I'm not there to entertain. I'm there to work, for the people who don't have a voice, for the youth who deserve a second chance. My initiative is about giving kids from vulnerable communities a shot, not a stigma. The audience applauded, but Kimmel leaned forward, his smile turning slightly crooked. That's great, Jasmine, really. But let me ask you something a bit more serious. He paused, and the studio fell silent. The camera operators exchanged glances, and the director, wearing a headset, whispered something to an assistant. You talk a lot about criminal justice reform, but don't you think your ideas are, well, how should I put it, a bit naive? I mean, aren't you just playing to voters' emotions to seem like a trendy congresswoman? The question stung. Jasmine narrowed her eyes, but her voice remained calm. Jimmy, I'm a lawyer who's worked in the justice system. I've seen how it breaks lives. My ideas are based on facts. In the U.S., 639 people per 100,000 are incarcerated, and the majority are people of color. That's not naivety, that's reality. If it sounds trendy, maybe the problem is that justice only recently became a trend. The audience erupted in applause, but Kimmel didn't back down. His eyes glinted as if he sensed the scent of a ratings hit. Oh, you sure know how to talk, that's for sure, he said, laughing. But the laugh was hollow. But let's be real. You're young, energetic, and let's say very theatrical in Congress. Don't you think your loud speeches are more about grabbing the camera's attention than making real change? That was the second question, and it cut deeper. Jasmine gripped the armrests of her chair, her nails subtly digging into the upholstery. She knew Kimmel was referring to her viral speeches, like when she called Republican hearings a circus in 2023. But his tone implied something else, that she, as a black woman in politics, was more about playing a role than doing the work. The audience went quiet, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Backstage, Crockett's manager was already signaling the director, but Kimmel didn't seem inclined to stop. Jimmy, Jasmine began, her voice low but steely, my speeches aren't a show. They're about speaking truth when others stay silent. You know, when I became the first black woman elected from Texas's 30th district, I wasn't thinking about cameras. I was thinking about the people who've been waiting for change for decades. If that looks theatrical, maybe you should ask why the truth sounds so loud. The studio erupted in applause, but the tension became unbearable. Camera operators frantically switched angles, and panic brewed in the control room. Kimmel leaned back, his smile now strained. He glanced at his notes, a flicker of challenge in his eyes. The audience froze, sensing that the next question could be fatal. Jasmine sat upright, her gaze locked on Kimmel, as if bracing for battle. The air in the studio grew heavy, and everyone knew the storm was just beginning. The camera operators scrambled to capture every gesture, every glance. Backstage, Jasmine Crockett's manager was waving her arms, demanding the director halt the shoot, but he just shrugged. Live TV couldn't be stopped. Kimmel, sensing the tension but seemingly relishing the moment, leaned forward. His eyes gleamed, and his voice grew sharper. Jasmine, I get it. You love big words, he said, his tone sarcastic, almost mocking. But let's be honest. Don't you think your initiatives are just a way to score political points? I mean, criminal justice reform sounds cool, but aren't you just trying to appeal to young voters who love hashtags like #NumberJusticeNow? This was the third question, and it hit like a blade. It not only diminished her years of work as a lawyer and politician, but also implied that her motivation was mere superficial PR, not a genuine fight for justice. The subtext was clear. As a black woman in politics, in Kimmel's view, she cared more about image than real change. The audience gasped, and someone in the back even whistled. Jasmine pressed her lips together, her eyes flashing, but she didn't look away from Kimmel. In the control room, panic erupted. One producer whispered into a radio to prepare for a commercial break, but it was too late. Jasmine leaned back slowly in her chair, her posture impeccable. She took a deep breath, and in that moment, the studio fell still. Even Kimmel seemed to sense the shift in the air, as his smile dimmed slightly. Then Jasmine spoke, her voice calm but piercing, filling every corner of the studio. "Jimmy," she began, her tone so measured it made the audience lean forward. "I didn't come here to play your games. You want to know why I fight for criminal justice reform? Because I grew up in Dallas, where I saw the system break people who look like me. Because I was a lawyer defending those society had already written off. And because I, as the first black congresswoman from Texas's 30th district, know that my initiatives aren't hashtags, they're lives. The lives of kids locked up for minor crimes while the wealthy skate free. The lives of families torn apart by injustice." The audience began to applaud, but Jasmine raised her hand, silencing them. She wasn't done. Her gaze was now locked on Kimmel, fearless. "But let me make one thing clear, Jimmy. Your questions aren't just questions. They're laced with the racism and sexism I face every day. You think you can diminish my work by suggesting I'm just playing to emotions or chasing attention? You think you can challenge my career because I'm a black woman who speaks loudly? Well, let me tell you, I'm not here to be your entertainment. I'm here to change a system that's ignored people like me for decades." The studio erupted in applause, but Jasmine didn't stop. She turned to the audience, her voice growing stronger. "And I'm speaking to every one of you watching this show, at home or here. If you think fighting for justice is PR, you haven't been listening. If you think a woman speaking truth is theatrics, you haven't seen what strength looks like. We live in a country where 1 in 3 black men end up in prison in their lifetime. Where women in politics have to prove their worth twice as much as their male colleagues. I'm not just a congresswoman. I'm the voice of those you don't want to hear, and I won't let you, Jimmy, or anyone else diminish that." Kimmel sat stunned. His face lost its usual confidence, and the hand holding his note cards trembled slightly. He tried to interject, starting with, "Jasmine, I didn't mean—" But she cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "No, Jimmy, you meant exactly what you said. You thought you could challenge me because I'm not who you're used to seeing on this stage. But I'm not your victim. I'm Jasmine Crockett, and I represent people who deserve respect." She stood from her chair, her movements calm but brimming with dignity. "I came here to talk about my initiative, about the youth who need support. But you chose to make this show about you. I'm done." With that, Jasmine removed her microphone, placed it on the desk, and walked off the stage. The audience exploded in cheers, some even rising to their feet. The camera operators, unsure where to aim, frantically switched between Kimmel, who sat with his mouth agape, and the empty guest chair. In the control room, chaos reigned. Producers shouted at each other, and the director waved his hands, trying to rush to a commercial break. But the moment was already lost. As the show went to break, social media ignited. Hashtags, Team Crockett and Yoshai Kimmel called out, instantly trended on X. Users, especially older audiences who admired Crockett's candor, shared clips of her speech. "Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass in dignity," wrote one commenter, a 62-year-old veteran from Texas. "Kimmel thought he could humiliate her, but she destroyed him," added a 65-year-old teacher from California. Clips of her speech spread like wildfire, racking up millions of views in hours. For Kimmel, the consequences were catastrophic. His carefully built reputation as a humorous, charismatic host took a hit. Critics in the press and on X accused him of racism and sexism, pointing out how his questions twisted Crockett's achievements. A Washington Post article called the incident a masterclass in self-destruction, and a petition demanding Kimmel's apology garnered tens of thousands of signatures. The show's ratings plummeted, and advertisers began voicing concerns. Kimmel issued an apology the next day, but it felt forced. "I had no intention of offending Jasmine Crockett. She's an incredible politician, and I regret if my words were misinterpreted." But the damage was done. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett emerged as a hero. Her criminal justice reform initiative gained unprecedented attention. Organizations supporting vulnerable youth reported a surge in donations, and her speech was incorporated into civics education programs. Older generations, especially those over 60 who valued her principles, called her a voice of truth. On X, memes compared Crockett to historic justice advocates, and her stage exit was dubbed legendary. In Congress, colleagues, even from opposing parties, expressed respect for her courage. A week later, Jasmine held a press conference in Dallas, announcing the expansion of her initiative thanks to new funding. "I won't let anyone silence me," she said, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Her speech on the show became a turning point, not just for her career, but for broader conversations about racism and sexism in media. She proved that dignity and truth could outshine any microphone. In the studio of Jimmy Kimmel Live, the lights dimmed, and the crew prepared for the next episode, but the shadow of that night lingered over the stage. Kimmel might return to his usual role as a jokester, but for many, he would forever be the host who underestimated Jasmine Crockett and paid for it with his reputation.